Today we're replacing the Subaru pitch stop mount with this Perrin aftermarket model. This is a thick aluminum one with polyurethane bushings. I'm installing this on a 2018 Subaru Crosstrek, which has a naturally aspirated engine. If you have a turbocharger on your Subaru, which probably means you have an intercooler on it as well, the intercooler tends to be at the top, and you're going to have to remove that to get to this part. Take note that your kit comes with some polyurethane lubricant. If you don't use this, you may end up with some squeaks that you don't want. After lifting the hood, figure out what you're going to have to remove in order to get to the top center of the firewall. On this example, it was the intake tubing, so I removed it from the throttle body, the air box, and had to remove this plastic clip here. Now I can see the mount that we're going to be replacing today. On the firewall side, it's bolted into place, and there's a nut that is welded to the body that you don't have to hold in place. However, on the engine side, there is a nut on the bolt that you will have to hold in place. On most Subarus, these will all have 14mm heads on them. Note that on the firewall side, the bolt has 2 captive washers on it. On the engine side, there are 2 washers, but one is on the bolt head side and the other one is on the nut side. With the bolts removed, this mount comes out pretty easily. Compare the old and new mounts to make sure they're the same length. Once you have confirmed that you have the right part, be sure to grease up the polyurethane bushings before you install it. Put grease where the bushing is going to go as well to ensure that you have minimal chance of getting dry spots. Remember the way that the old part came out and do it in reverse to install the new part. Start with the large end and push it into the firewall side. Don't worry about lining it up perfect just yet. Once it's in far enough, push the small end down to the engine side. With both sides of the mount roughly in place, line up the firewall side and get the bolt through. I put a little thread locker on this, but it's not a required step. Now line up the engine side of the mount and make sure you put the bolt in with 1 washer on it, and then put the second washer on after the bolt is through. I put thread locker on this bolt too, but once again it's an optional step. Next, get your torque wrench and tighten these bolts down all the way. 43. 37. Once those bolts are at their proper torque level, install the air intake tube or whatever was in your way in order to get to this point. Now that was a fairly easy job. Let's go test drive it now. Alright, my first impressions are, when I cranked it up, I could definitely hear the starter working a little more. It's not doing more work, you could just hear it more. And I feel like I can hear the CVT a little bit more. Maybe the engine's louder. I heard it before, I can hear it now. If there's any difference in it, it's very slight. Maybe if you have an aftermarket exhaust or something, that noise gets amplified through the polyurethane bushing. I don't know. What I do know though is there's a definite increase in the whine from the CVT. And I want to be clear, this part is not making anything work harder. It's just attaching the engine and transmission combo to the firewall more firmly, so the noise channels through it a little bit more. The positive though, power delivery is super smooth. Alright, let's hear that start up. Particularly when you're shifting from reverse to drive or drive to reverse, when the transmission is completely changing the direction of torque. That combined with how smooth the car accelerates now, it makes it so not only is this a good performance mod, but it's good for a daily driver too, as long as you don't mind the slight extra noise that it gives. On this car, installation was surprisingly easy. On a car with a top-mounted intercooler, I can see it being slightly more difficult. So I actually prefer this modification over that steering dampener lockdown that I did earlier. So let's go over the changes that happened after this modification was added. The starter noise. That is not a benefit, but it's done as soon as you start it up, and you don't have to worry about it until the next time you start it up. The engine noise. I know some people don't want a noisy car, and to those people, since this doesn't really make it any more loud, this mod will work for them. I kind of like it a little loud. I don't want obnoxious exhaust, but I do like a slightly louder engine where I can hear it, tell what it's doing, and I was kind of hoping for a little bit more noise out of it, but I'm not unhappy with what it had. The CVT noise, on the other hand, is kind of a whiny noise, and I could take it or leave it. It's not really ringing through your head, but it's there. It's definitely something that you can cover up with music and or air conditioning, so it's not a big deal. Throttle response. This is where the modification shines. You don't have to wait for the engine to like slightly shift before it's in that place where it's going to stay when the torque is delivered. It's just immediately there, and it just immediately responds. Coupled with the CVT, it makes it super smooth. Even with a manual transmission, you'll be able to feel that it's just ready to go, more so than with the old mount. So either way, I'd recommend this mod for that. And finally, the sturdiness when shifting from drive to reverse or vice versa. This is how the car should feel from the get-go. So overall, don't expect like a big miracle change to your car after installing this. It definitely helps, and whether you are performance oriented or just use it as a daily driver, it's definitely an improvement. The pitch stop mount that came off of this car is still usable. It wasn't worn out, and I wasn't replacing a bad one. So if you are actually replacing a bad one and you have to spend the money on a new pitch stop mount anyway, I'd really recommend going this route. The polyurethane bushings are going to outlast any rubber bushing you try to put on this thing. So for enthusiast driving and performance driving, this is almost a must-have part. And for daily driven cars that don't have any mods at all, this is actually an okay part to get. I'd actually recommend it. This car is pretty much stock and is a daily driver, and this modification I'm really happy with from a just general daily drive, don't really care about performance kind of perspective. I can see why Subaru doesn't put these on from the factory. The starter noise is kind of loud, and the CVT whine, it's kind of there. And if you're trying to sell a car, you want it to be super quiet and reliable sounding, so they're going to go with the part that's going to do that. So I understand from their perspective why it's the way it is, but I feel like this is the way it should be. If you want to get this part for yourself, consider buying it via the link in the description of this video. We get a small commission from that, and it helps us make more videos like this. Commissions from previous videos actually went straight into buying these two Perrin performance parts. Either way, thanks for watching this video. I hope this made installation a little bit easier, and I hope to see you in the next Car Simplified video.